Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I am 𝘂𝗶𝗰𝗵𝗶 and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out and take action towards the next level of your life. I am interviewing leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week, every Monday and Thursday. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with Richi Watson. Richi, you overcame hellish adversities from childhood, both physically and mentally, to become a pioneer teacher of personal transformation, development and self-authorship. You've spoken on stage alongside experts such as Dr. David Hamilton and Wim Hof. Your approach as a deep transformation coach and life development mentor is rooted in your own personal transformation beyond chronic pain, illness, PTSD, anxiety, and suicidal depression. Richi, welcome to Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I'm grateful to speak with you today.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. Thanks for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Richi, shall we start with your story? You have an immense story, and could you isolate 1 or 2 major key defining moments in your journey that have led you to where you are now?
Okay, so I think in my story, there is deep challenge within physical challenges with my health, and that began when I was very young. So I could perhaps point to when I was 17 and things really deepened for me. This was an experience so up until now, as a child, I'd been like off school, like probably a third of the time with illness. And like if anything's going around, I get it. I'm also hyperchemical sensitive, which means when they paint the school at the weekend and I go in, my throat closes up and I'm off school for a few weeks contending with that reaction. So illness was a big part of my life as a child, which obviously was unpleasant, but it was an amazing opportunity to overcome those challenges within me. And I was doing that and learning a lot from it just by virtue of having a lot of time to do it and repeating the experience of being ill and uncomfortable and in pain. So it's like, as a child, let me just say this so everybody can kind of come on board because everyone can relate to this.
Yeah.
As a child, if you're ill, you could be ill in the morning, but in the afternoon you could be running, jumping, climbing trees. And there is this we kind of live naturally in a placebo state because we haven't got so many layers of mental noise upon the thing we're experiencing. So that means we can move naturally with the flow of our experience. So if a child starts to feel better, that's how they express themselves, as feeling better. They don't have to be completely better to be able to step into the flow of expressing themselves as better. And that is not only good for us physically because it harnesses the mind-body connection, but it's also a wonderful mental approach to life. So through my journey, I not only continued experiencing that because illness never stopped being a part of my life as I grew up, but I honed it as well. So I was embodying, I would say, a form of placebo, both for me physically, but also emotionally. However, the physical challenges didn't stop and life was very difficult to contend with. At the age of 17, when I was walking to the bus stop to go to college one morning, my body waved a white flag and I went to take a step and I collapsed. I collapsed against the wall and I couldn't take another step. I just didn't have strength in me. I was exhausted to my soul. There was nothing left. And that's because I was trying to move through this exhaustion, these physical problems, and I was continually trying to move through them, and there were no good solutions for me presented. So I just kind of tried to keep getting by and do my best. But there came a point where, I just couldn't move forward anymore. So that I was against that wall, leaning against that wall, trying to move forward for about an hour and a half before my mum happened to drive past and see me. And she rescued me, gathered me in the car, took me home. And so I had to leave college at that point, and I was in bed for many weeks, unable to do very much. And things deepened to the point where I was now chronically debilitated for long periods of time. And it was very, very difficult because what was happening at that point was now, while my friends were going to university and doing the things that I wanted to do, I was in bed, or I was able to do very little. The big accomplishment for me at some stages was walking to the post office around the corner to get my benefits that week. You know, that was the thing that I did that was outside the house. Walking up the stairs was a massive thing sometimes. You know, it could take me half an hour. Maybe I couldn't make it. Maybe I'd have to pause 3, 4, 5 times. Maybe I collapse at the top of the stairs. So these were the kind of physical challenges I was experiencing, which were very difficult, of course. And they touched everything. They touched my socialization. They touched my friendships. They touched my dreams, my goals, my ambitions. Another big event that to contend with was when through just a web of unfortunate circumstances and wrong place, wrong time, I was walking home one evening and a fight ensued right next to me. And then people were trying to bring me into that fight by trying to fight me, and I wasn't that interested. But at some point, some plainclothes police officers came onto scene. I wasn't aware they were plainclothes police officers. There was just a group of people carrying what looked like large metal bars. And I was chased down because I ran away when these guys come onto scene. I was chased down and I was beaten unconscious. And when I drifted unconscious, I had what I would call a psychological death experience because I thought I was dying. And that experience and the experience that followed, because it was a horrible instance of police brutality, which I never got any justice for, led to PTSD and chronic anxiety. So now I'm in my very late teens, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm contending with the ongoing physical challenges, which need, you know, some steel and some strength, and also some acceptance and surrender, and a good ingredients of all of these things to keep me moving forward. But now I'm experiencing a lot of problems with my anxiety, stress, depression, and I was suicidal for a very long time. Agoraphobic, didn't leave the house for long periods. So these were the things I found my way through and beyond, to the point where I managed to find ways to move forward and make life work for me, to solve my problems. And then I started sharing about what I discovered, and it turned out that those things were helpful for other people too. And then that was a whole new adventure, Aggie, because now I was teaching what had worked for me and learning from the people I was teaching how to teach them, which was wonderful, really wonderful, because then I learned so much more. It's like every single person I got to be of service to, I was then learning from, as I'm discovering exactly how it is I can be of service to them. And along the way, I guess I've become pretty good at
it. Richi, I can't even begin to imagine, of course, the kind of impact, emotionally and mentally, that these adversities had on you. I can't even imagine. But what I wanted to ask is, was there a low point in all that? Where in your journey did you start going up and saying that, not accepting it and doing something to, go through to the other side?
I think there were many times, actually, Eggy, when I was... Eggy, sorry. Eggy. I'm sorry. This is a new name. This is a new name that my mouth is coming to terms with.
That's fine. Don't worry about it.
I think there were many occasions when I was defiant and resolving to move forward, even when I could. There was many times when I think what you're asking for and pointing towards is what I would call the meaning points. It's like when I was connecting to meaning. This is when things might be hellish and horrible, but there is a reason that's bigger than the hell that means I'm not going to stay there. And one of those events was actually an occasion when I did collapse at the top of the stairs. Having got to the top of the stairs, it took me a while. I collapsed, and I was there for many hours, and I didn't have the strength to move. And my mum returns from work, and as I heard the door go, I was heartbroken that she was going to see me like that. Not only is it's a really unpleasant experience, to be debilitated to that point. But she's walking up the stairs, and I know she's going to see me. The emotion was so much. Tears already began. And then I saw her, and she's there, and she's comforting, and she's loving, but she's also, there are tears to see me in this way. And in that moment, that was one of these moments that was the meaning of that. It means so much to me that I'm causing you pain. I love you and I care for you, and I want you to be happy and free from my hell. I want that. And that was so meaningful that became a passion that kept me, if not always moving forward, then facing the right direction. Mm-hmm. So that was one big one. And another one is actually related to someone I love. I lost my granddad, and I was in my early 20s. I was 21, and my health was on the decline here. It wasn't great. And should I say, actually, let me back up. When I lost my grandmother and my grandfather were around. They were ever present in my childhood because I was off and off school and staying with them. My mum and dad owned a butcher shop and a greengrocer's that were 2 doors away from each other. I had like a life that was like a quaint English sitcom. And my grandparents lived above the butcher's. So I was always every day I was with them. I was with them probably more than my parents, actually. And they were just a second mum and dad. I was so lucky. Some children don't have a mother or a father, and I had two of each. I lost my grandmother when I was 18, and I was in the midst of contending with all of these things and not yet finding what really worked for me. So it was a really difficult time. And I wasn't there for it. I was 18, and I wasn't there for her. I went to visit her in hospital. I was there for a few moments because I couldn't bear seeing her as she was, and I left. And that was the last time she was lucid enough to speak. I never spoke to her again. And she was uncomfortable. Her lips were dry, she said. I didn't even pass her water. I just kind of got out there. And that was one of the most painful experiences, having lost her and then let her down, not said everything to her I wanted to say. So I had all of these regrets. And the thing about regrets is they're very useful, and we have a lot of vilification. That's something that happens in the self-development world a lot of the time. In the more kind of self-help or spiritual centric, live without regrets, don't have regrets. It's like, well, regrets are some of the best feedback you're ever going to get. Regrets are the thing that mean that you might not carry on doing the same stupid thing again and again. But some regrets are so big and so painful, it's difficult for us to want to go near them. But through the next few years, I faced that regret. I held that pain fully and deeply, owned it, so it could then become an integrated part of me, so it could strengthen me rather than haunt me and weaken me. And by the time my grandfather was passing, I resolved to be there. Mm-hmm. And so I was there every day by his side on his deathbed. And I was there the moment that he realized that he was dying, because he was very elderly and he hadn't actually been told explicitly that this was happening. And he realized it. He came to realization. He said the words, "God help me, I'm dying." And I'm by his side, my mother's there and other family members, and we're there present to when this man that we adore is realizing he's coming to the end of his life, and he's facing that fear and that reality. Aggie, the very next thought that he expressed was concern for everybody else. He realized he was dying, and the very next thing that this wonderful human being expressed was concern for everyone else and love. And he said, "I just want to give you everything. I don't want to give you all something." That was what he said. "I want to give you all something." And my dad was there, and he said, "Alan, you can have all my tools." And that was such a beautiful thing, because my granddad was an engineer. His tools were a big part of his world, and he had accumulated these tools throughout his life. And there's his son-in-law. "I want to give you all my tools." And that was such a simple but deep, the deepest expression of love. And I realized at that point that their relationship was so much more than father-in-law, son-in-law, they were father and son. It was beautiful. He then started to say these words, Aggie, and this is when things got very deep and meaningful for me. He said, no more fighting. There's always family fighting, right? He said, no more fighting. You have to look after each other. Everybody, you have to look after each other. And then he turned to me and looked me in the eyes. And at this point, he was quite blind and couldn't see very well. He looked me in the eyes, and I had my hand in his hand. And he said, promise me you'll take care of each other. And I was feeling every kind of emotion so deeply I couldn't even speak. I went to speak, but I couldn't. And I just nodded with tears in my eyes. And that was one of the most meaningful moments of my entire life. So one being, I made a promise. Mm-hmm. And in that promise to take care of each other is a promise to be a kind of person, as I saw it. And with that also, the thing that I need to do to honor the life of this man who I love so much is to be more like him, mm-hmm. is to bring those qualities into the world and through me. And that's what I endeavored to do from there, to keep that promise and to be more like my hero, mm-hmm. And I've never seen anything more heroic than I saw when that man was passing. Yeah. Not an easy commitment to make, especially given the challenges I was still experiencing. But that meaning has been certainly one of the fundamental drives that I've had, not only to keep myself moving forward, to be able to overcome these challenges, to not be a burden on those I love, to give them the freedom of not being burdened by that, but also to be of service, to be able to help others out of similar hells, their own version of whatever I might have experienced and other things.
Mm-hmm. When you were saying the story about your grandfather, I was having goosebumps. So it's a very powerful story. There is something that you mentioned about regrets, and that's I find that concept very intriguing, and I understand what you said about the phrase "don't have any regrets, no regrets from now on." And in my own self-exploration, I have tried to avoid the regrets, because when I face them, it's probably the most painful negative emotion, that regret, because there's, the way I see it, and tell me what you think, is that you can't do anything about it anymore. So that is the deepest feeling, that the deepest negative feeling.
Yes, that's it. And I think my example with my grandmother passing is a really good one, because that's a regret that you cannot do anything about. The person's passed, and that was what made it so huge. Mm-hmm. And I realized, and this is what I've realized, Aggie, that these things, they have a gravity, but usually we've trained ourselves to meet that gravity with a repulsion. It's like, this is such a huge thing. There's so much pain here. There's so much discomfort, so much meaning, because if it's that painful and that uncomfortable, it means there's meaning here. And we tend to avoid those things. Mm-hmm. But but if we do that, we don't live without them. We live with them haunting us. We live with them in the background, in the shade, permanently. Now, if I were to avoid the reality of those regrets surrounding my grandmother, if I was going to avoid that, what I'd be doing, and I've seen people do this, I'd not only be losing her to death, I'd be losing her from my life, because I wouldn't be able to get as close to her memory. Because if I'm getting close to her memory, I'm getting close to that regret. And suddenly, I'm avoiding thinking about her. And that would be the ultimate tragedy. And Aggie, I see people do it. I've worked with people that have done it. I know people that can't drive past the street where the loved ones they've lived, and they just avoid. And that's a tragedy upon a tragedy, to lose someone from your life in that way after you've lost them to death. Mm-hmm. So going through the process of being able to hold that is most painful, to be able to go towards that thing that you would rather just didn't exist, and be able to go into it and be with it. Be able to get real about your relationship to it and own it. Yeah, I did this. I got this wrong. And it's nothing other than a tragedy. It's nothing else. It's just awful. Now, what I can do now is be and become better. And in making that peace, because that is how you make peace, it's the way you make peace, I can then, moving forward, invite her back into my soul. I can invite my grandmother back into my heart. Mm-hmm. I can live with her close to me. And I can now, she's with me every day. And I look upon now our life together with fondness and joy and an undercurrent of sadness that's beautiful, because that sadness is love. But she's with me. I'm able to be with her. And that's how that's come. And that's how important it is, Aggie, because it's like, I wasn't doing that. I'd be avoiding that. I'd be avoiding her memory. Mm-hmm. And so that's how worthwhile it is and how important it is. And the problem with a lot of, with a lot of what I do is not only is filling missing links, but also correcting some massive misadventures in the self-help world. And one of them is this idea of just trying to repackage tragic events and tragic things to make them something else so they don't have to be bad, because there's the avoidance of feeling bad. We don't want to feel bad. So this thing is awful and I feel bad when I think about it. So how can I change that? I'll try and change the meaning. I'll try and change this tragic thing into something that isn't tragic. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't work out very well for people. It doesn't work out. The whole idea of everything's a blessing doesn't work out too well for people. It's like these platitudes in the self-help world are there because they're compassion oriented. It's like, don't feel bad. Everything's a blessing. But the problem is you go far enough, you end up with a lack of empathy and connection, because it's like, well, everything's a blessing, really? I mean, I can name a bunch of things right now that aren't inherently a blessing. Do you really think they are? Like the horrors that can happen to some children? You think these things are blessings inherently? That's not right. And it leads to a disconnect from true empathy as well. It's more accurate is some things are just awful, Aggie. And having the courage to acknowledge that makes you an extraordinary person. And going through the process of facing everything that means and everything you feel about it means that you connect with the strength that exists to hold that tragedy. And when you connect with that strength to hold it, that means you become the person strong enough to hold it. You can be that person and you can integrate that moving forward. You move forward with it. We don't try and throw it away, leave it in the past in that way, because like I said, you get haunted by it. And there's a lot of drives to try and repackage everything as somehow inherently good when they're not. They're bad. They're bad. They're tragic. They're ugly. They're painful. They're awful. I don't have to list the things. We can all just think, yeah, there's some terrible things that happen that are just tragic. Being able to acknowledge and own those things is a very worthwhile experience, rather than trying to repackage them as something else, because then what we get into is a dynamic of what I call resistance and denial. Mm-hmm. And when you're in resistance and denial and you're disconnected from the thing, you're causing yourself so many problems. There's peace that comes on the other side of the willingness to acknowledge and hold that which you wish didn't exist. Getting really real with it. That's actually when we make peace. And we become the people we need to be, because it's like the next tragic thing is going to come. And if we've avoided this one, if we've repackaged this one, and we haven't become stronger through it, and we haven't connected with it deep enough and the meaning for us, when the next tragic things come, we're not going to be able to contend with that either. We're not going to be able to deal with that. And maybe I make the same mistake with my grandmother as I made, with my grandfather as I made with my grandmother. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what we'd be doing. No, man, that isn't the orientation. So there's something to be said, to be clear here, for, you know, not obsessing on the regrets and the things we do. But for me, the first starting point is the deep willingness to acknowledge it. The deep willingness to acknowledge it, to meet the meaning in it, and to learn the lesson, and then become the person that doesn't keep making that mistake, doesn't keep doing that thing.
Can you clarify for me? I find it fascinating. There is one thing I want you to explain further, because you say to embrace it, to understand, to go deep into the regret. Is there anything wrong while doing that, also reframing it to a different meaning? Because in a way, what is... You said that some things are just pure awful.
Mm.
Isn't there a chance that there is the opposite of option of something that we might have not considered or we might have not thought of at all? Because for me, labeling something just pure awful denies every other possibility of something that we might not be aware of. So I appreciate, I understand what you're saying, and obviously reframing something that is obviously negative into something that is the opposite in an attempt to get on with it and forget about it, it's certainly it's wrong. I'm only asking, is there any way to combine the two rather than excluding the reframing or seeing it in a different way?
Yes. And that would be, so the idea is this, that thing. So if something happens that is tragic and your relationship to it is that, so it's an acknowledgement of that, because that's real. And anything else can put you into dynamics of self-denial and resistance. So it's like, okay, hold on, this is real. When I lost my grandmother and I let her down and I wasn't there, this is real. Now, what am I going to change that to? I'm not going to change that to anything that's going to make too much sense for me. But, so there's not like inherently a blessing. However, within that experience was also the potential for me being able to be there for my grandfather in a way I wasn't before. Mm-hmm. So it's what we do with it. So the blessing doesn't inherently exist. We have to create it. And so what I would say is it's acknowledging the meaning within our relationship to the tragedy, the bad, and then creating a meaning that doesn't ever make the tragedy good, but it makes something good from it. And I think that's the way we combine. And I think that is accomplished by going fully deep in your acknowledgement to the tragedy first. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise what we're doing is the thing we're creating next, it isn't built on reality. So it's weak. It isn't strong. It's soft, and we struggle with it and we get it really wrong and it falls down. It's like a house of cards. You know, it's not, but if you get really real first, if you get really real, this has happened and it means this to me and I feel this way about it. And this is what I got wrong. Mm-hmm. And this is what I feel about that. If you get, then you're on the firmest ground possible for the thing you do next. And then you create something good going forward. Mm-hmm. And then you create meaning from it. Like the meaning I'm explaining to you, which is in owning and acknowledging this, I'm able to do better. I'm able to do better. I'm able to learn from this and I'm able to do that. Mm-hmm. But it's not skipping the fundamental first step, which is ownership, which is deep acknowledgement. Okay? Does that help?
Yes. I think it's exactly what you... I agree with what you say. It's just the way that you put it now, it 100%. You have to acknowledge and own it. Absolutely. Not avoid it by putting a different meaning on it.
Yes. And do you see how that's done a lot? You can see how that's done a lot in the self-development world. There's an awful lot of trying to reframe things from the off. It's like, okay, see it positive and see it like this. In the more, like I say, spiritual centric, it's things like everything's a blessing. And it's like, man, you see what you've done to yourself in avoiding the reality of your own suffering connected to this. You're now disconnected from empathy, because the idea that all events and all suffering that happens to people are blessings, well, it's actually more in the direction of evil than it is compassion.
Thank you. Clarify one more thing for me, Richi. Since we're talking about regrets, because you said you used the phrase that many self-development people mention, do not have any regrets.
Yes.
And I completely understand what you just told me about regrets of things or events that have happened. What about the future? So for me, if you told me, Agi, I don't want you to have any regrets, I would take it personally that my actions should lead to a direction in my life that I'm doing the best I can or as much as I can, so that I don't have the regrets of, avoiding opportunities or having missed something that I could have if I succumbed to my fear or my limiting belief, because that is another form of regret, which is a regret of lost opportunity or lost growth.
Yeah. So, I think it's a bit of a conflation with the idea of regrets and opportunity, because they're not the same thing. I think better would be take your opportunities. Mm-hmm. Don't miss an opportunity, Okay. Be willing to experience challenging and scary things so that you can become more and discover things you might not already have. But what we really want, and this happens so much, is what we want from the idea of don't have any regrets is use regrets properly. Mm-hmm. Because if you're using regrets properly, that's how you end up not living with regret. And then for me, that process is one that I describe as acknowledge and use. When you acknowledge and use the emotions that you're experiencing, your relationship to the experience that you're meeting, if you acknowledge and use that, then you come to peace. Then it's an integrative process, and we're in spectrums of resist and deny or include to transcend. So this is the solution orientation, I would say. It's like you include to transcend. That means everything. That means willingly include all of it, because that's how you transcend it. And if you're not willingly including it, you're in some degree of denial and resistance. Mm-hmm. And the moment that we come into that willing inclusion, so it can happen, the miracles that happen in my emotional transformation work, again, it's just what I've experienced personally. Switching from wishing the experience away, having a relationship without emotions, which is one of an enemy dynamic. And again, we see these ideas. I see this meme shared endlessly. It starts with your anxiety is lying to you. Your anxiety is lying to you. And after then, it says all these things which seem good, like you're safe, you're supported, you're okay. All these things that seems okay, but the premise of this idea, your anxiety is lying to you, is a recipe for anxiety. Because it's creating an enemy dynamic with your own emotions. And it's not true. That's not how things work. Your anxiety isn't an enemy. It's a friend. It's trying to inform you. It's trying to bring you awareness to something you may need to know. But if your relationship to it is such, and that's being compounded by these kind of memes and these ideas, it's my enemy. It's trying to get me. I need it not to be here. I need to wish it away. It's not going anywhere, because it'll become fortified in that resistance and denial. But if we instead go, well, my anxiety is my friend and I'm willing to experience it when I need to, then you're coming into an embrace with the emotion. Rather than a resist and deny, you're coming into an include to transcend. And it is extraordinary how swift transformation can happen when that switch is made. It's like, okay, it's all working for you. Everything's working for you, not against you. Nothing is. All your internal matrices, be they physical or psychological, is working for you to bring you to well-being, to survive you, to help you live and thrive. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay. So welcoming feelings of stress, anxiety, and fear, being willing to just feel them, being willing to experience them, being able to hold even the spikiest and prickliest of emotions. This is the direction we need to go in if we're going to actually experience meaningful transformation.
It's difficult for most people to face those very negative, debilitating emotions, isn't
Yes.
it? So you see that all the time.
I'm working with people currently who are in very difficult circumstances. I've been in them, Nothing, everything I'm saying is coming from a deep personal understanding, but also professional. This is never to trivialize what people are experiencing. It's never saying, well, you should be able to do this. It's just pointing that this is the direction we need to be able to go in. And, I often use it. It's a dictum that Jung popularized, which is, to paraphrase, that which you most need to find will be found where you least want to look. And that's a significant part of things, Aggie. It's a really significant part of things. And while we see things like follow your bliss, we don't see what else Joseph Campbell said, which is to counterbalance that and add context, which is follow your blisters. He said, I should have also said follow your blisters. And you'll see the follow your bliss meme endlessly because people will like and share that forever. Not so many people have seen follow your blisters, and that meme doesn't get made, but it's a really significant part of it. Most of what we see and hear is some form of don't feel bad.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad. And that's a bad idea. It's a bad solution, Aggie, because the premise is feeling bad is itself bad, and feeling bad isn't bad. Feeling bad itself can be good because this is how you learn from your mistakes. This is how you grow. And we learned early on, didn't we? We learned early on that feeling bad was something we'd rather not do. So what we've done is we've spent a lifetime evolving coping mechanisms in order not to feel bad. And most of them are invisible to us now. We don't want to feel bad. We want to avoid feeling bad. How do we avoid feeling bad? Well, it feels bad to be the one that's wrong, so I guess other people being wrong is helpful. So if I blame other people, then I don't have to be the one that's wrong. And if I'm always the one that's right and I need to be right to be safe and feel good, then other people need to be wrong. So if they don't agree with me, they have to be wrong. And then that goes so deep that eventually the people that are wrong aren't just wrong, they're immoral and they're evil and they're the worst people imaginable because they are holding a different space to us. So blame centricity is one of the most prevalent coping mechanisms in our culture, to not feel bad and to try and feel safe. But it's a false sense of safety. That's not where safety comes from. Safety doesn't come through comfort. Safety comes through strength. That's true safety. The stronger you are, the safer you are. And so how do we become emotionally safe? We'll become emotionally strong. How do we become emotionally strong? Well, we need to hold. We need to be able to hold the heavy emotions, the difficult emotions, the ones we'd rather avoid and that didn't exist. Because if we're not doing that, we are weakening ourselves. And those things are just going to keep coming. They're going to happen. And so I say that when we avoid feeling bad, we inherently create a life to feel bad about. Because we're not doing the things we need to do because of the things we feel bad about. But if you get in it, you need to know it better. Like I gave this example to our mutual friend David Saville when we were on a podcast together. When I was in chronic pain, and I get up out of bed and I put my feet on the floor, I need to be very present to that pain. I need to get to know it better so I understand its needs. Because if I'm not getting to know my pain, if I'm avoiding it, then I might be moving in a way that isn't helpful. But so I might be causing myself more problem if I'm not present enough to my pain. There's also another problem, which is if you're not present enough to your pain, is I might not be doing enough to improve it. So for me, when it comes to certain injuries and issues I've experienced, you have to get into a perfect stretch, which actually helps you heal and grow and strengthen. And you do that by getting to really know the pain. Let me give an example because this has become a really good metaphor. When things shifted for me with my pain and my injury, I had a bad back injury and I've got a condition which makes things complicated. So I wasn't able to do any exercise. Now I'm at the playground with my daughter and there's they have the exercise machines now in playgrounds and parks.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And you use your own body weight on these. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can do any of these. Right? And I got on one, it's a seated lat machine. So I'm here and I'm pulling down. And I pulled this far. So my arms are straight here, Aggie, and I pull to here. And the pain between my shoulder blades is severe. Okay, so I stop. And then I go away, and this is what my mind says about this experience. I can't do that one. Okay? I can't do that one. And as I'm getting up, and as my mind's saying I can't do this one, I realize, hang on a minute. I actually pulled it about 2 inches before the pain. Like I pulled it towards the outer of the pain, so it was discomfort, but it wasn't pain. And it's not that I can't do it. It's just that I can just do it for 2 inches right now. So what I did is I got back and I did 2-inch reps. And I pulled in by getting to know the pain, by being present to it. And I'm pulling in towards discomfort, a stretch of discomfort, but not into pain that's going to cause me harm. Because here's the thing, Aggie, is like this pain, a lot of it is weakness that needs to be strengthened. So that pain is a signal to where I need to strengthen, not avoid necessarily. I don't need to, right, I can't do this, don't go near it, but actually find what it is I can do, can strengthen this. And through that process, Aggie, I went on that machine every few days or however often it was, and suddenly it's 4 inches that I can pull down to. And then at some point I can do a full lat. And then eventually I'm getting myself back in the gym. And that process begun with 2 inches. It's not that I can't do it, I can do it, and I can do it this 2 inches. And of finding that perfect stretch for me where I am now. You see how that metaphor works emotionally? It's like, okay, I need to get to know my pain. So I need to be with it. I need to be in it. To be able to actually heal it, to be able to actually strengthen it.
It's a great example that shows how looking at it in a different way and facing it and embracing it rather than avoiding it or makes such a huge difference. Richi, you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to ask you the word spiritual. So can you tell me, what does spirituality mean to you? What does that term mean for you?
You know what, Aggie, I haven't got a good definition for myself. It's not one that I've needed. And maybe I should, because I'm about to host a series of podcasts with my friend Tim Freke, who's a wonderful spiritual philosopher of 34 books, so I should be more prepared. I certainly, in this moment, I can think of spiritual experiences I've had. And I live with a certain spiritual dimension in my experience. And Aggie, I would say actually everything I've been sharing has allowed me to do that. I can be very present, and I live with I guess a pretty rare degree of presence. Being able to be in and with the uncomfortable actually liberates you to be in the majesty of the moment. You know, in all of its HD glory, the sights, the sounds, the colors. It's like if you're avoiding life and experience in the moment here, then that's going to be something that generalizes out to the rest of your experience, and it's going to kind of set a precedent within your psychology of just, this is why it's so important. And I feel I'm present to the majesty of the moment a lot. The just being, and in just being, there is something that feels good. That's something actually I've experienced throughout my life with the challenges and the pain and the illness. Even when I was a kid, I remember falling beneath the pain itself, the suffering itself, the unpleasantness itself, the uncomfortable, and experiencing being. I don't know how normal that is. I think it's pretty normal for children. I think maybe I have better access to the memories of it because of my experience. And that's something that's been around for the most part. And then it's been absent. There's been times when I've been in the Maya, the hell of the mind, and I'm thinking things and feeling things, and it really feels like that those things I'm thinking and feeling are reality. So I'm experiencing a reality of thoughts and feelings that are hellish and unpleasant, when really there's a lot more going on. And I've been in that Maya for considerable periods of time. When I was suicidally depressed, I was definitely in there. But then there's what happens when you're not thinking that thought. You know, what happens when you're not feeling that feeling? And there's just presence, and there's just being, and there's something about that that's good. And people obviously have wax lyrical about that in many different ways. So for me, spirituality, it's an active process, Aggie. The active process is personal transformation, so I can become more present, so I can be more conscious, so I can be more here, I can be more alive in this moment here, because I don't need to hide from it. So I can just go deeper and deeper into it, as deep as I can go, and keep going. I guess that's what I could say about that.
I love it. I like you said the majesty of the moment, being present in the majesty of the moment, and the way you were describing it. Earlier on, you were saying about the emotion, the negative emotion or the pain or whatever it is that people avoid normally. And now you just reminded me of the different kind of awareness that you need to have, not to identify with that emotion, to step out and look at it, or the feeling or the pain or anything else it is, because that is no different in a sense than a pleasurable emotion. Both of them are experiences, but of course it needs a certain level of awareness to be able to recognize that, and I think that's the result of that is the majesty of the moment, which I love this phrase. I haven't heard of it like that before.
It's how it feels, man. It's how it feels. And so what it's saying, this message, I just want to bang this drum, is just like, it's the include to transcend process. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I'm going to include it all, like the bad feelings, the uncomfortable, all of these things. Mm-hmm. In the inclusion is the transcendence. And then, because what happens, Aggie, is if you really go into and with something that you'd rather wouldn't exist, that you don't want to, your presence within it expands. Now, it's not like maybe you don't become completely free. Maybe that's not what's happening of the emotion and all the signatures of it, but it changes through your presence expanding within it. Mm-hmm. And we can be triggered and reactive and avoidant. But then when we willingly go into and we connect with that strength to hold and be, our presence within what we're experiencing expands. And there's awareness. And in that, we've got the strength and we've got the clarity to then make a good decision, to then do something good with the emotion that we've been wanting to avoid, mm-hmm. informed by it. And that's awareness and consciousness. So these moments are usually the place where we are training ourselves to become unconscious. We're training ourselves to not be present because we want to avoid them. Yeah. So it's like, okay, how are you going to be present over here? Because you're training your mind not to be present. You're training your mind not to be conscious. You're becoming more and more unconscious, which is a typical experience as we get older. We become more and more unconscious. We become more and more the driver who performs a journey in the car and then doesn't remember the journey, because this has become something that's become very automatic. And we really want to reorient our consciousness to be able to become more present. We can't do it while avoiding these things. And so what I'd say is, if we can understand the premise, which is like, just like the pain that we're in, if we mistakenly put our hand in the furnace here, mm-hmm. the pain, so the experience is unpleasant, but the pain itself, so the existence of pain is not itself bad. Mm. It's there to help us. It's there to get your hand out of the fire because you're harming yourself. Yeah. So it is itself good. And that's true too emotionally. But what we've done, of course, is we've come to a place over our lifetime of avoiding feeling bad because it's undesirable. So we're avoiding the uncomfortable. So it's like, okay, we don't want to put our hand in the fire, but also it becomes we don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. Mm-hmm. And we need to have uncomfortable conversations. We need to, because if we don't, we'll have an uncomfortable life. Mm-hmm. We need to go into uncomfortable places. Why? Because if we don't, we're never going to get the things that we really want. We're not going to accomplish what we want in life, and we're not going to be able to be and become the human being we need to be to accomplish them. We need to be able to do that. And a fundamental reframing of the meaning of supposedly negative feelings, because they're not a negative thing. They may be an unpleasant experience, but they're there for you. Mm-hmm. And if we're doing that, we're willing we're willingly including them, then we transcend them. And I say to my students and clients, negative thinking leveraged is positive thinking. Mm-hmm. And again, with so much out there, it's how do we stop negative thinking? Well, don't try and stop it. Leverage it. Use it for what it's for. This is the thing, Aggie. It's like the fundamental first step is being missed. And that fundamental first step is actually a meta step. It becomes part of what you do all the time. Mm-hmm. It's acknowledge and use. So we're treating everything as an enemy. So you're experiencing stress. Well, that's bad. How do we get rid of it? You're experiencing anxiety. That's bad. How do we get rid of it? I saw this during the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And I was really concerned about what a lot of people in the wellness and self-development industry were saying. Mm-hmm. Because it was this immediate, if it wasn't, hey, buy my superfood products, #COVID, which I don't think is necessarily the way to conduct ourselves in business. If it's not that, in self-development, it's okay, you're feeling stress, anxiety, do this process. Come and do this transformation work. And it's like, hey, this is not, no, it's not time for that yet. You haven't asked anybody what their relationship to what's happening is. Yeah. You haven't asked them if they're acknowledging and using the emotion for what it's for. And this is what's being overlooked a lot of the time. It's like, right, okay, so much of my work is made easier by beginning from that place. Okay. You're anxious and stressed a lot of the time. Okay. Well, are you using that for what it's for? And they're not. Why? Because we don't want to feel it. If we don't want to feel it, how can you use it? How can you leverage it if you're avoiding it? So it's, okay, you're anxious. The COVID thing's happening. Okay. Of course you're anxious. It's okay to be anxious. This is fine. This is normal. The anxiety is a good sign that your emotions are working perfectly, because there's this unknown thing that we don't understand that could be a threat. So we acknowledge the anxiety. I am scared. I'm feeling anxious. Mm-hmm. We acknowledge it, and then we use it, because that's what it's bringing our attention to something we need to do or need to learn, need to understand. So it's okay. Inform yourself now. Find out what's happening. And then once you found out what's happening, find out what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And then take those precautions. And then what we're doing, we're taking that supposedly negative emotion or negative thought, and we're taking it on a constructive journey that leads to a positive outcome. We're using it for what it's for. And doing that regularly. So it's like, and then the anxiety returns after you've already done it. Okay, go through the process again. Doing that alone, Aggie, really helps heal what people think are chronic anxiety and stress problems. Because we're not doing what we fundamentally should be doing first, which is acknowledge and use. Because it exists for a reason. Use it for what it's for. Maybe there's something here that's beyond that, maybe, but we'll never know until we start using it for what it's for first.
Absolutely. Thank you. Richi, do you want to give me a brief overview of what you do with LifeWell UK? And then I want to ask you some quick-fire questions as well.
Oh, cool, man. Good. Okay. Well, LifeWell UK really became it's an events company, first and foremost. So we're not doing too much right now. But through that, I created the Wellbeing Now experience, the Heart, Soul, Science seminar, workshops, retreats. And so that's LifeWell UK really is, okay, I want to put on some great events. It's going to be done via LifeWell UK. And some wonderful things have happened through that. The meeting of communities of people coming to these events. The last 2 years, that's been on pause a little bit. It's come on a quite hard pause because of the COVID situation. So there's not much activity coming in the way of events. And I've been focusing really more on my own personal work, my personal transformation work, my coaching, my mentoring. But definitely in the future, there's going to be some interesting events. What I'd like to do, Aggie, because I created these weekend events, the Wellbeing Now experience, which were just extraordinary events. They've been incredible. But it's like, okay, how do I make this stick more? How do I get people to really, how does it really make a difference? And what I've decided, I'm going to start making some events myself, other people. You mentioned David Hamilton, he'll certainly be at one, where we're having the speaker interact and share their talk for their hour. And then we have a break, and then we get a couple of armchairs and we're sitting down and we're having a conversation, which we're bringing the audience into. It's interactive. And I want to make these evenings like these, we used to, in Britain, we used to have these audience with events with comedians. I want to make audience with authors and teachers and coaches. LifeWell UK will be will be the hub of that. But it's not really an active place right now, and it's better for people to connect with my personal social media.
Since you mentioned that, can you tell us how can people then? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
The best way at the moment is to to go along to my Facebook page, my not my personal one. You'll be bitterly disappointed with what I share there. the professional one's much better, because there's actually things that are relevant to what we're doing here. And also, my website, which is 𝘂𝗶𝗰𝗵𝗶. Richi is spelled without an E, RICHI. It's far easier to find me on Google without the E. 𝘂𝗶𝗰𝗵𝗏, and there is a chat box there, which means that people can get in touch, via that. So those are the two best ways. I do regular Facebook Lives. They've been weekly up until recently. I'm taking a pause for August, and then I'm going to be back doing my series, which is Beyond Mindset, which I'm going to be myself and some great guests, including Tim Freke and David Hamilton and James Tripp, and just some wonderful coaches and teachers and authors. And also, I do a regular Facebook Live called Supernatural Live with my friend David Saville, and he's an extraordinary coach. And we get together and we have emergent conversations where we want to really dive deep and extract new things. And we tend to talk for between an hour and 2 hours. It's often interactive, and there's always new there, because when you get two people talking, then it's like, okay, we know all of this, but we don't necessarily know what each other knows in the deepest way. So let's go on that adventure. We call them emergent conversations. That's what we want them to be. Not, okay, I'm going to say the same thing I've said a bunch of times to you. Like, I think that as an interview format, I think we need to go beyond that. We want to have rich emergent conversations, like this one.
Awesome. Let me ask you then some quick fire questions to Richi. Cool. I'm very curious about the first one, which is, what does personal development mean to you? I'm saying I'm curious because of what you were telling me about the controversy earlier. So what is the term? What does the term mean to you? So
personal development, on a personal level, generally, like I say, there's some misadventures. There's a lot of them. But personally, it really means a willingness to go where you'd rather not go, to discover what it is you're looking for. Really, for me, that's the framework of personal development at its heart. Yeah.
And if you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self with what you know now, what's the one piece of advice you would give him?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't give any advice, because I wouldn't want to fuck it up. Because I know what comes, and I like what comes.
It's meant to improve his life, not to fuck it up.
Exactly, right. But that's the thing. He needed all of the shit to be able to, Yeah. I sometimes think about this, Aggie, especially the suicidal me. I think, what would have been my experience if I could have got a glimpse at me in the future now that's done everything I've done. The kid that couldn't answer a phone to his friends or leave the house, who now gets up on stage in front of hundreds of people. Yeah. Like, I don't. There's nothing to be gained from that, because it happened. Unfortunately, I had the right balance of things to be able to move myself forward. But okay, hypothetically, if we're saying hypothetically, but not in, and I'm not actually getting the time machine, so there's no risk of me fucking it up. What would I say? Wow. It's a bigger question. Let me really. I think the simple thing is, like, I find myself thinking, what would I say to other suicidal people who are going through hell? Believe me, it can and will change. It really can. I know you can't see out of it right now. I know it doesn't feel that way, but it really can. It really can. And I'd want to express that to someone who's going through what I'm going through. I'd want to express that so purely and heartfeltly that they could hear it. I think that's what I'd like to do.
And I think that question is really about somehow extracting or distilling the wisdom that you've acquired since you were 18 and put it up in a nice package that hypothetically it would benefit your older self. But thank you for sharing this. And if there was something you could do, like wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today, what would that be?
It would be, I'm going to sound pretty obsessed with this philosophy, but it would be able to encourage and help the world be able to engage that with that it would rather not experience. Mm-hmm. And as an extension of that, actually, the big problem that we're seeing so clearly now, which is it's a normal part of our primal drive to see things in this or that, what I call polarity consciousness, or in binary thinking. It's this or it's that. The reason that's an extension of is it safe or is it a threat? And we will, it's a normal paradigm. If right now we're experiencing, is it this or is it that? Because if it's not this, it must be that. So that means, I think this, and if you don't think this, you must think that. This is right and this is wrong. This is safe, this is a threat, which is why people respond. If you're thinking your position of being right is safety, and this position of being wrong, there must be a threat to that safety, which is why people respond in the way they do. I'd love to invite people into and just this invitation of integrative thinking, rather than polarity consciousness and binary thinking, integrative thinking. It might be this and that. It might be this in this circumstance, in this context, but it might be that in this one. And let me give an example to that. I think is really relevant based on what we're talking about, which is another meme is what you resist persists. Mm-hmm. Right, that's one, and it's true. The problem people have with things that they find to be true is they think they're absolutely true, and it's rare we come across absolute truths. Most things are contextually true, and this is one of them. And almost all of the things, you'll hear me saying things like almost all rather than always and forever, because this is absolutism, which is more polarity consciousness. So almost all of the things we hear, are laced with these kind of misadventures. So that which you resist persists is true of the inner world, but it's not true of the outer world. Mm-hmm. So there's that context which is necessary, because otherwise what happens is people write, this is true, and they hold on to that. They're no longer intervening in their life, in the world, in a way that could be resistant. Yeah. It's like, I can't resist. And then suddenly you're in hell because all of these things are happening you don't want to happen, and you're not able to stand against them in a healthy way. And you can resist in the outer world while being in a accepting in your inner world, because it would be, if there's something happening and you want to stop it happening and you don't, well, suddenly you're in inner resistance. So your non-resistance, your external non-resistance becomes an internal resistance. And so, I think that would solve so many problems, Aggie. It would at least be a major leap, like a huge leap, evolutionary leap forward in solving our problems if we were to step into more integrative thinking and integrative consciousness in those ways.
Richi, I want to thank you very much. This has been a deep conversation, and I really enjoyed it. I want to wish you all the very best, to thank you very much for your time and your wisdom shared with us today. Any parting words?
I'll just thank you, Aggie. I've really enjoyed spending the time with you. I love your vibe, your energy. I love your smile. And thank you for this invitation and helping me reach and connect with other people. It's beautiful. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening. Please take a moment to subscribe and review Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts, and also share this podcast with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to gain access to exclusive content while supporting this podcast, then become my patron. The link is in the show notes, or you can type bit.ly/pdmpad. If you want to know more about what I do and how I can help you, or if you have any questions, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. Again, the link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/pdmgroup. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.